defines a generation. Music is a soundtrack of revolution. Music is a soundtrack of movement. Music is a soundtrack of cause. There is an intersection of politics and pop culture that you didn't even know existed. There's some boy, some girl sitting in a cubicle along K Street, somewhere in DC. A boy, a girl sitting in a cubicle along a hill with a Capitol with a dome who has single-handedly decided what you wore today. Whoa.
Mike Muse is an industrial engineer, a music executive, a political architect. He breaks down the intersection of politics and pop culture. This is the Mike Muse Show.
What's up, world? It's your boy, Mike Muse. Happy Sunday, everyone. Welcome back to another conversation of the Mike Muse Show. We had so much fun yesterday with Jimmy Jam unpacking one of my favorite Janet Jackson albums, Janet. And it seemed like that was one of you all's favorite albums too, and it sounded like you guys really enjoyed the conversation from all the feedback that I got. As always, keep hitting me up at I am Mike Muse, M-U-S and Sam E on Instagram, Twitter, and Threads. All right, man, we have a jam-packed show today, so let's just get right into it. We are tackling two monumental topics that will have huge impacts on the direction of America. First is the Pentagon's shift under new Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth. Yep, Pete Hegseth got that confirmation late into the hour on Friday night and Saturday morning, and he was confirmed as the new Defense Secretary. That was the one that I was watching very closely, along with every other American as well. And the other topic I want to dive into is the accelerating world of artificial intelligence. I love that topic, and there's always so much to unpack. And so my goal for this year is to bring you guys up to speed, and I want the Mike Muse listeners to be the most knowledgeable Americans around on artificial intelligence and policy that either needs to be shaped or will be shaped. And so, but we will begin with Hegseth's confirmation, which ended with Vice President J.D. Vance casting a decisive tiebreaker vote in the Senate. Homies, that was a nail-biting victory, has already generated discussions about leadership, defense priorities, and personal controversies. Then we'll explore the fast-moving frontier in technology, artificial intelligence, from Meta's $65 billion investment in data centers to OpenAI's newly unveiled operator tool that performs tasks on the internet autonomously. And the AI landscape is growing so rapidly that many are struggling to keep the pace, folks, because these headlines all broke this week. So many big changes and updates. And I mean, so much is happening so fast on the political front, but at the same time, so much is happening on the technology front. And so we are at this incredible intersection of both because the AI landscape is growing so rapidly that many of you are struggling to keep up, including myself. At times, I'm struggling to figure out how much I need to report out to you, how frequently, because so much is happening across the board. But today we're also going to look at the strain on the national power grid caused by the swift expansion of data centers. And I already touched on that a little bit earlier this week on the Sway in the Morning show about what that looks like and the need to add urgency to policy questions around energy usage and sustainability, because it requires so much energy to power artificial intelligence. So all the things you guys love to use around AI, that requires so much power that our current energy grid and system oftentimes just cannot keep up. And then I want to really examine the Department of Defense and how that might intersect with these emergent AI developments, especially given the critical role big tech CEOs have played in shaping U.S. policy. I really do believe, aside from the Pete Hegseth, I do believe that if the United States government can start using more technology, I do think that it will bring down the cost of our defense budget. And I think that can be really great cost-saving measures. And I think that is something that hasn't really been explored and hasn't been talked about. But I'm really going to push the conversation today. As I was saying, on late Friday night into the early morning on Saturday, Pete Hegseth was sworn in as Defense Secretary. But the process was anything but smooth, folks. As you know, his confirmation, it required a razor-thin vote, 51-50. I remember I was getting texts from my friends as the votes were coming in. They were all just waiting. And I ended up saying, I was like, he's going to get confirmed. Once I saw the hearing, I would have been shocked if he was not confirmed. That's what I mean. But with this vote being 51-50, Vice President J.D. Vance was the tiebreaker. This is one of the narrowest margins in the position's history, dating back to 1947. I had to go back and do a little bit of research on that one. 3 Republicans this go around, Susan Collins, Lisa Murkowski, and Mitch McConnell joined all Democrats in opposition, which reflected both ideological and personal concerns. I knew Susan Collins and Lisa Murkowski would vote against Pete Hegseth. I wasn't quite sure what Mitch McConnell would do. I had a feeling that he was leaning that way. But what I gather by Mitch McConnell voting against Pete Hegseth is that Mitch McConnell is thinking about his legacy. He is thinking about how will he be viewed going forward. Mitch McConnell, for me, will always go down as one of the most important Senate majority leaders for the Republican Party, as he achieved his goal of what he wanted. Senator Mitch McConnell always wanted to be the majority leader in order to confirm as many conservative judges to the federal judiciary. And why is that important? Why am I singling that out? That's important because no matter who is in the Oval Office, many of policy positions will be at the behest and the guardrails of conservative federal judges. This is why it's so important that we pay attention to our judiciary system, in particular from the local level with those get elected, that we pay attention, because that begins the pipeline to have individuals like Senator Mitch McConnell be able to appoint federal judges as they see fit. And so our federal judiciary branch has a lot of conservatives on there, so that will be the guardrail, no matter who is in the Oval Office, whether it's Democrat or Republican. And that was something that Mitch McConnell always wanted to do. And so as Mitch McConnell is leaving the Senate, I think that he is thinking about those things, which is why he cast that vote against Pete Hegseth. Some of the controversy revolved around allegations made by Hegseth's former sister-in-law, who earlier in the week accused him of abusive behavior and heavy drinking. Hegseth has denied the allegations. He dismissed them as politically motivated attacks. What was interesting about that was his sister-in-law came on and was saying that, she had assurances from certain senators, more than likely Republicans, because all the Democrats were in line to vote against him, that if someone was to come on the record, because previously everything had been anonymous, that they would vote against Pete Hegseth. And so as of now, she feels like she was taken advantage of and that their word was not kept. And as a result, she's really discussing what it means for women going forward to come forward and to put their names to things, and is it worth it? I don't know. It's a really good conversation to be had at a later time. I would love to interview the sister-in-law and kind of get her perspective in terms of what type of insurances was she guaranteed, because that's a strong position and a strong assumption to have if it didn't seem like it was 100% guaranteed. But aside from the sexual assault allegations, critics, including Senator McConnell, also argued that he lacked the nuanced understanding of national security challenges that are needed to manage the Pentagon's immense responsibilities. Hegseth is very outspoken on the term warrior ethos and his vow to end what he calls woke agendas within the military have further polarized the debate, while supporters say he brings fresh energy and focus to war-fighting detractors' questions and whether he will prioritize unity and strategic oversight at a time when the defense budget stands at almost $1 trillion, folks. It's approximately $850 billion to be specific. Despite the controversies, his confirmation, is a clear sign that President Trump is doubling down on a more aggressive, combative style of leadership at the Pentagon. And within hours of being sworn in, Secretary, and now we have to say Secretary Hegseth, released a message outlining his top 3 priorities from the Defense Department. 3 million employees. He came out yesterday morning saying that he is pledging to revive the warrior's ethos. Eventually, I think that needs to get unpacked in terms of what he means by the warrior's ethos, insisting that the U.S. military has become too entangled in non-combative related activities. Many believe that the military has been engaged in ongoing operations for decades, and some questions of whether it truly needs an infusion of warrior culture instead of additional focus on strategic planning, diplomacy, and technology. In particular, as we think about how our adversaries now are getting more technologically advanced too as well. I'm looking right at you, China. China is very sophisticated now when it comes to artificial intelligence. And what has really been a key asset to the United States military-wise in the protection of the actual physical land of the United States is the body of water that separates us from other countries on both sides, from the Atlantic Ocean to the Pacific Ocean. It's really difficult for other countries to sail Navy ships, their naval ships over here. It's really difficult for missiles to be launched from other countries over here to the United States because of how far we are separated to the ocean. But what brings that gap closer is technology, and it is now about cyber warfare, right? And what does that look like in this space? That's why I was saying a few moments ago, the importance of really looking at technology around our defense and around our defense systems in order to protect us from the ongoing threat of cyber warfare and other technological weapons that our adversaries could use. I think this is why it's important that we don't focus solely on warrior ethos, right, and going back to combative styles. I'm not saying that's not important and that our soldiers don't need to be trained adequately, but we have to be thinking about how the theater of war is starting to look different. Secretary Hegseth's second priority involves strengthening the nation's industrial base, something that has already come into the spotlight since Russia invasions of Ukraine 3 years ago. By cutting back bureaucratic red tape, Secretary Hegseth wants to accelerate weapons development and deployment, ensuring that service members in the field have the best equipment. His third priority is to, as he says, is to reestablish deterrence by defending the homeland and bolstering alliances into the Indo-Pacific to confront China's growing military influence. I really hope that that involves diplomacy, because it's so important that we do not allow China to overtake Taiwan, because eventually that will, and because the reason why we support Taiwan the way that we do is we want to keep that strait between China and Taiwan open so that goods can flow freely as they are shipped over here to the United States, so that we can receive our products and we can receive our products without the interference of China playing, geopolitical games that will ultimately hurt the American consumer, in particular in our pockets. Pete Hegseth also referenced President Trump's wish to end wars responsibly, which presumably includes addressing ongoing conflict zones like Ukraine and the Middle East. Now, that is something to really pay attention to in terms of where do we go with Ukraine from here, and what will happen to Ukraine. In particular, as the work that President Biden has done with sending support over to Ukraine, ultimately it has weakened Russia militarily. It's caused a drain in their soldiers, and also, too, it has caused them to use a lot of their weapon stockpiles. And so a weakened Russia is really a good thing for the United States. And so it's going to be really curious to see where does President Trump and Secretary Hegseth go now, surrounding Ukraine, and whether Hegseth rhetoric will translate into effective, modern defense strategies. That all remains to be seen, folks, especially among those who are skeptical of both his leadership style and his apparent lack of experience at the highest levels of national security. Now, as I've been mentioning a lot about technology around the Defense Department, it's really important that we begin to look at the Pentagon and its technological frontier. It is vital to recognize that artificial intelligence is reshaping national security in dramatic ways. The Defense Department has historically worked with private tech companies on pioneering technologies, including the internet itself. But folks, today, AI presents both extraordinary opportunities and significant risk, in particular as we're thinking about our adversaries. It can improve intelligence gatherings. It can improve logistics. It can also even the development of autonomous military hardware. Yet it also raises ethical concerns, especially around the creation and deployment of automated weapon systems. Something to think about in terms of a practical sense that we all might be able to wrap our heads around is the drones. Essentially, drones are an artificial intelligence advanced technology systems that does not allow for us to require that many boots on the ground, where we can use the drone systems in order for surveillance and also to take out our adversarial individuals. And we've seen that done. We've seen drones take out leaders of terrorist regimes. But one thing that does is a risk to that is sometimes in an effort to take out our adversarial targets are individuals who are innocent bystanders impacted as well, and is there a loss of life in that space? And so the ability to contain the drone attacks just to the individual versus to communities and neighborhoods and innocent bystanders, that is one of the risks. Another risk that doesn't get talked about too enough is the mental well-being that is taking on those individuals who are operating those drones. Essentially, imagine yourself playing a video game in a room, either by yourself or there's maybe one or two other individuals where you're controlling, I think like a game console, controlling a drone to actually attack and take out our adversaries. Over time, what does that do to your mental health? Because it's no longer just about a game. So that's some of the things that when you think about risk, obviously the other risks are definitely much more consequential, but I'm trying to give you as many practical examples as I can in order to help bring this to life. Secretary Hegseth's focus on rebuilding the industrial base could easily translate into deeper collaborations with industry leaders like Microsoft, Oracle, Meta, and Amazon, especially since they have the capital and expertise to push the boundaries of AI, with the emphasis being on capital because it's so expensive to be able to build these systems and to be able to build that type of software that is needed. However, the potential pitfalls, folks, include data privacy, foreign investments in sensitive infrastructure, because a lot of times, a lot of these companies, they do have outside investments, and they have to go overseas for development. In particular, I'm looking at OpenAI. We'll come back to that a little bit later. And also, too, the escalation of an AI's arm race with global rivals. I keep talking about this idea that so many Americans who are afraid of artificial intelligence, they want this moratorium on artificial intelligence from our U.S. companies being able to develop and deploy different AI tools. But what I keep saying is that we have to stop looking at artificial intelligence as from this Western perspective and recognize that is global. I think by now, of all the conversations that we have had here on the Mike Muse Show, you guys are fully aware of that. So I need you guys to be my advocates out there as we have this conversation to really advance policy, because if we are trying to stop U.S. companies from developing and deploying artificial intelligence tools, not just for defense, but just in terms of productivity tools that we use on a day-to-day basis, that doesn't stop China from developing and deploying tools. It doesn't stop India. It doesn't stop Russia, right? It doesn't stop European countries from doing it. And so we will fall far, far, far behind the artificial intelligence arms race if we do that. And so we have to be able to continuously innovate, but while at the same time put guardrails in place. And I believe that's where our Congress has failed us, by not putting the appropriate guardrails in place through legislation, and so that we can advance the innovation while still protecting the things that I have just outlined. Because these issues are not, just theoretical. As our current memories, show, President Trump has already rolled back safety regulations on AI development, emphasizing speed and scale over caution. In such an environment, the Pentagon's ability to remain agile and ethically grounded will be tested like never before. I think we're going to definitely see, and I'm pro-technology, obviously, no secret there, that this administration, the Trump administration, will be very much more pro-technology versus the previous administration, the Biden administration, where they were more cautious and more pragmatic and more interested in incremental steps of AI. I'll be curious if, given a second term, will they have taken much more of an aggressive tone and approach to it? Whereas President Trump, he only has one term left, so is he unafraid to, get in, break things fast, and rebuild quick, right, when it comes to artificial intelligence? So that's just something to think about as we, move forward. But one of the most pressing concerns is the growing energy consumption associated with artificial intelligence. I couldn't wait to really talk with this about this topic to you guys. I talked about it this week on Sway in the Morning about the amount of power and energy that's needed to power artificial intelligence. It's a challenge spotlighted when we start hearing around the terms data centers. And that data centers that are powering artificial intelligence applications require an immense amounts of electricity, largely because of the specialized graphics processing units needed to run these complex models. Projections suggest artificial intelligence could consume around 0.5% of worldwide electricity by 2027. That's a lot, folks. That's comparable to the annual energy use of an entire country, such as Argentina. I really had to put that out there, that is comparable to the amount of energy that Argentina uses. In some regions, utilities are keeping coal-fired power plants operational longer than planned just to meet the heightened demand from new data centers, which goes to the idea of the use of coal, right? As we try and roll back our dependency on coal and go into more clean emissions, how do you balance that? And this is why I'm a firm believer that nuclear energy is going to enter the chat really quickly, really fast. It already has entered the chat, but it's already entered in the chat of like those of us who are just aware of it. But pretty soon it's going to hit the mainstream because it is going to require so much more power, and nuclear can provide that. Nuclear energy is clean, obviously until it's not, but it's clean, and it's a different form of energy that could be utilized to help power these dynamics. Fun fact, I used to do nuclear chemical research back in the day, so nuclear is my jam and things that I am excited to do. But if you take companies like Google and Microsoft and Amazon and Meta, they have publicized their efforts to rely more on renewable energy, but increasing data center capacities to handle artificial intelligence workloads often cancels out the gains from these sustainability initiatives that Americans have really worked hard for, which is also too about the Paris Climate Accord, right, in terms of globally and global emissions, to which President Trump has removed us from sort of one of his biggest executive orders when he took office. But Bill Gates have expressed optimism that artificial intelligence efficiencies will eventually compensate for the surge in consumption. But for the time being, large-scale artificial intelligence may be doing more harm than good for the climate. But should the Pentagon follow suit and rapidly expand its artificial intelligence capabilities, these energy concerns may become part of the national security conversation, introducing a new dimension to the term, defending our homeland, because we've already seen, that kind of goes to where I was talking about cyber warfare. If our foreign adversaries were to, attack us, one of the ways they can attack us is through cybersecurity on our energy grid. And if we already have an insufficient output of power and electricity, imagine what harm that would do if our foreign adversaries were to attack our current grid system that it has now. And as we need to build on much more of a grid system to power these data centers, what happens, to us to become more vulnerable? And then what happens to our data centers if they are then under attack from a national security perspective and cybersecurity? So this is what I mean by the landscape of warfare is changing. It's just not boots on the ground in traditional warfare, which why I was leaning so much into what Secretary Pete Hegseth was discussing about warrior ethos, if we're not really looking at cybersecurity and technology in order for ways to keep us safe.